Hey everybody, welcome to this webinar on process cues. Excited to get this one going. Thank you for your grace in rescheduling this topic a couple weeks ago, but love to hear in the comments where you're joining us from. I'm in Lansing, Michigan, and I have not met you yet, or if you haven't been on one of these trainings, I am a creative director at my church, Trinity Church, full-time there. So don't work for PushPay, just want to share what I have learned in using this database and how you can use it effectively to communicate and engage with the people in your church and your community. So process cues are a pretty cool feature that CCB has, and there are some misconceptions with it though. So that's what we're going to talk through. This is probably one of my favorite features of the database. There's a lot of versatility you can do with it and a lot of things that you can create and ways that you can help streamline your ministry. So let's dive in. All right. So the first thing is the misconception with what process cues are. So process cues are not sales funnels. They are not like with MailChimp or those sequences that you can do in ActiveCampaign or any kind of sales type of software or email software, where if someone clicks on this, it triggers these actions or something. That's not what process cues are. So and that's kind of a common misconception. So what are process cues? Best way I can kind of describe it is process cues are reminders of your intentions. So what I mean by that is you have you have volunteers, team of volunteers, and you intend to do these specific actions with them on a regular basis. Maybe it's a monthly training email you want to send out, or maybe you want to send them a card and you want to do that maybe quarterly. You want to be sure everyone on a quarterly basis gets a card, a personalized card from you. So those are great intentions. Those are great ideas, but ministry gets in the way, right? There's a lot of things. Sunday's always coming, and we can forget those intentions that we have. So process cues remind us of and can send us notifications of, hey, you wanted to do this with this person. You wanted to do this action, and this is your reminder to do it. So that's really what process cues are. Now, what are the steps to creating a process cue? There's actually a lot of steps that you do before you even get to the database. So first, just in the general sense, thinking through the processes in your church. Now, after I show you how to make process cues, I'm going to go through the top 3 processes that I think every church should have, and then several more examples as well of other things that you can do. But where do you need to track people through specific action steps? So it could be a membership process, a connection process. Then you want to spend time either writing a notebook or on a whiteboard, whatever way you works best. You want to write down what's the purpose of the process, what are the cues or the steps that are needed within it, like what are the things that have to be done, and then what kind of automation will go with each cue. Maybe they need to be added to a group after they complete a certain step, or something in their profile needs to be changed. You can't change everything in a profile through process cues, but there are some fields that you can change right now. And then who is responsible for each cue? Now, you may have processes that you don't have a different person assigned to all the cues. That's really the majority of my processes, but there are some that it's specific people. And then you get to go to the software and create the process. And so when you're creating the process, I'm going to walk you through that in a second. Then once you get it all done, get everything in there, all the information, immediately start using it. And then as you're using it, you can make adjustments as you go, which I know for some personalities that is like, well, I want to get it perfect before I start. But the thing with process cues and with a lot of things, you've got to get in it. You've got to use it to see how it's actually going to work and function. And then you can make adjustments from there. When we first did our volunteer process and created a process and process cues for that in CCB, I think we had 15 or 20 different queues for it because it was every single thing was a separate queue. Well, then as we were going through it, we realized actually, you know what? These 5, I really do at the same time. So they don't all need to be a separate queue because I'm just spending my time going, mark as done, mark as done. And so that was a way that we just streamlined it. So now our process queue for a volunteer process is I think like 6, maybe 10 queues. I have a slide of it a little later. So let's jump over into the database and we'll create a process. As always, if you have questions, please drop them in the comments. I'll be happy to answer them as we go. But let's go over to our database. So here is, I'm going to go back to home for a second. So from home, you go over to people on the left-hand side. And up at the top, it's the processes tab that you want to go to. And then this is what the window looks like. So it's going to default to what is managed by me. So these are the active processes, excuse me, that are managed by me. And then here are the queues that are managed specifically by me. And then my assignments is everyone's name and what queue they belong to. And then if you have the process admin privilege, then you will have these 2 tabs. If you do not, then you will not. So active and archive. So this is the full list of all the processes we have in the church. And then archived is the ones that have been archived. So pretty straightforward. If you do not have the process admin privilege, then you cannot create processes. For us, I'm really the only one that creates processes for our church because I walk people through the process of thinking through the different queues and helping them streamline it before we start making it. So I generally meet with them, talk through all the steps, get it all written out, and then I go in, make the process, make them the process manager, and then I'm done. So we're going to make a process right now, and we're going to call it Katie's connection process. So I remember to archive this after the training. And then I pretty much have all of our processes as hidden processes. The reason for that is just people don't need to see what processes they're in, then we don't have to be concerned about how the queues are worded. If you have a volunteer process, for example, you really want that to be hidden because someone going to their profile, if they're in like a red flag background check queue or, something like that, it's causes unnecessary stress for a person. So I pretty much check every single one is hidden and then do save. And this brings you to the process page. Now you can see, you can click here to add the first queue, or you can go over here under actions to add new queue. Edit this process. It takes you back to the title. If you're like, oh, I really do want this to be hidden, or if you want to delete this process, then you do save. Archive this process. What that does is that archives it, but it doesn't delete the information from a person's profile. If you delete a process, then you are removing all of that data from their profile. So as best you can, you really just want to archive it and just let that list fill up. It's no problem. It doesn't affect anything in the database. So just archive processes. Duplicating the process. This is great. Like for Vacation Bible School, for us, we use process queues for room assignments and for our registration and volunteer process. So instead of having to type all of that out again, I can just come in, duplicate the process. No people transfer over. It's just the queues that transfer over when you duplicate a process. And then edit process managers. So this is if I wanted to add a process, and you always have to add yourself. So it doesn't default adding the person who created the process as a process manager. So that has tripped me up a couple times. All right, so now we're going to add queues. So we're doing a connection process as an example. And so I'm going to type in connection process, and I'm just going to go through and just start typing all of these things out. And I'm not editing anything. I'm just typing everything in, getting all the information in. And you can have more descriptions if you want. We actually do have more descriptions than this. I'm just doing this for an example. All right. So then you get all your cues typed in, and you see how this is just kind of a straight, boring list. So what I like to do, and it's purely for looks, is you reorder cues over here on the left-hand side, and then you can indent. So I always have one cue that I don't put anything in. I just use it as a header. So that's what this connection process is. And then I just edit. There's no rhyme or reason for how many clicks. Just keep it consistent. So this is a first visit, and this phone call is also at the first visit. So I'm going to put that in a little bit more. And then do this. So I'm just going down. And then this welcome, this is supposed to say welcome card. Let me fix that real quick. All right. So this welcome card one, you might have like a physical card. So this would be the same if you, any type of physical card that you have that you ask people to fill out. You can make process cues for what they can check on the back. So for us, we have one that's growing in my faith. That's a mail merge that goes out. So when someone fills this card out and we enter it into the form automates the person to the process queue. And then our discipleship pastor gets the notification, and then they can send out the mail merge from there. So from the queue. So we just use whatever the welcome card is. I'm going to keep knocking these over. So now that looks how I want it to look. Again, there's no function purpose for having them indented. It's just purely just to categorize things and keep things organized and looking good. So then once I'm like, yep, this looks good, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to start putting in instructions. So I clicked on the queue, and then I go over here to the right and do edit this queue. Now on this first screen, you can add a description and instructions. And you always want to do this, especially when like you might have a lot of turnover or something. It's really important to have the instructions that you want. Oops. So there's really no difference between the instructions and the description. They show up in the same spot. So you can either have it all in one, or you can have it in separate ones, whichever you prefer. Then you put in details. So for this one, we really want it to happen right away. And if you're going to have queue managers, then you check both of these. You can see one is if it's assigned to them, and one is just emailing all queue managers when a person is unassigned. And then we go into automations. So for automations, you can, from this, you can add someone to a group, to a new serving position if you have a volunteer form, to an event if it's an event registration. You can change their membership type. So we want to have them as a guest for this. And then if they got baptized, and then you can assign a specific mail merge to this. Now, the thing with mail merges to keep in mind is you can't edit the mail merge when you hit mark as done. Like when you are marking as done, you are sending that mail merge. So I'll show you a little workaround to that. So typically I don't automate mail merges with this. There like some monthly ones I do, but for that reason. And then next queue. So when they go into this one, I want them to next go into the 2-week and the 30-day follow-up and the 3rd week meetup. And you can choose if I want these automated, like checked automatically, and like I can't change it, or if I want them to be optional and checked by default or unchecked by default. So if every single person that goes in this queue is going to have that action, then it would be automated, checked by automatically. If you some people will, some people won't, then it would be optional. And if it's but still most people, maybe 90% of people, then you'd want it to be checked by default. So I'm going to do that for these three. Because this is a phone call, it could be that you know you they're like, yep, I came and I don't ever want to come back. So you're like, oh, okay, great. And so you uncheck them and they just move on. So and then we hit save. All right. So for this one, actually, this is our email one. So for this one, this is from a save search. So you can see that the children's ministry team runs a check-in guests for previous weekend search, and then they get added to this queue. So that's how this one works. The next one is the phone call. So then we come in, edit this queue. I'm going to add the description and the instructions. And then the automation is already set, and hit save. Now I can also add a queue manager. So let's say I'm going to have Mickey Mouse make these phone calls. Mickey and Minnie have actually volunteered together. Super great. So appreciate that. So then Mickey and Minnie get added. And then let's say that Donald Duck attended our church, was added to this queue. This one automates right from the form. If someone checks that they're a guest, they come right in here. So Mickey comes in and is like, oh, yep, okay, I will do this. I will do this one. And they can hit accept right here on the left-hand side. They can hit accept. Or if click on the name, I can assign this to someone. So maybe you have a process manager or like a connections pastor that oversees the whole process, but then you have a team of volunteers that are actually making the phone calls. Then I could come in and say like, okay, Donald Duck, can look at, okay, brand new. Yep, there's no activity here at all. He's totally new, is married. Daisy is his wife. All right. You know what? I think that Mickey is really going to be a good one to contact. So what I did over here on the right-hand side, I clicked assign, and then I'm going to assign this to Mickey and hit save. So now you can see up here, it says assign to Mickey Mouse. And then you can see the people have disappeared because there are no people assigned to myself or unassigned people to see. But if I had selected that our queue managers, when they get someone assigned to them, get an email, then Mickey would be getting an email right now that says that Donald Duck has been assigned to them in the phone call process queue. And they can click the button in there and then get all of the information right there. And then we always want to remind our people, let me click on Donald Duck again, the notes section. So whenever we make a phone call or a text or have a contact with someone, we always want to leave a note. So spoke with Donald. He loves our church. So, and then I would hit add this note, and then you can see it shows up right there. I'm going to delete that. So you can see who can see this note. Appropriate leaders, that is like people in your group leadership structure that are a part of that department. This process only is only the people in that process can see that note. except for full read admin privileges. Full read admin privileges can see all notes in a person's profile. And then only me is only you. So we have told our people the only me does not exist. It's just a mirage. You can't click on it. So don't try. That's what we have told people. And people have done it. So now let's say that Mickey is like, okay, yep, I've made the phone call, had a great conversation. So I'm going to mark as done and then hit save. So that's kind of how that works. Now, let's say for this third week meetup. So this is actually an invitation to the third week, the last Sunday of the month. We have a meetup after the services for everyone who's new. It's kind of like a reception kind of thing. So what we can do for that one is if we go to edit this queue and go to the details tab up at the top. Now, this due date we can set to be like 3 days later or 5 days later, and it's days later that they get added to the queue. So once they're added to the queue, that clock starts. But there are some other options with this. So number of days later, there's also day of the week, monthly by day, monthly by date, or quarterly. So I'm going to do monthly by day and set the third Monday of the month this is due. So actually we're going to do Wednesday. So the third Wednesday of the month, they'll get this notification to send out a text message or a phone call and let our guests know that they are invited to the meetup the following Sunday. And then I would hit save. So that's one way that you can do that. Now, I put in all of the information. I get everything in. I've added queue managers. Everybody is set. Then I go in and I start, we have that welcome card. That's when I would go in and make a form for that models the connection card that we have that has information for contact information and then the choices. And I would go in and make that form and then add the automations to go into the process queue. So let me show you what that looks like. I'm just going to do this real quick. All right, checkboxes. I would not do this link. Would not be this direct, just to be clear. Students. So I add my choices in the form. And then under automations, I can add an automation. And I select. And I typically just get them, like go down the column. There's no reason. You don't have to do that. So in a form, you may know this, you can add responses to a group, event, a process queue, or a position. And process queue. And then once you start typing it, it'll show up. And so then you can see it's putting it in the process of Katie's connection process, which is correct. And it has to be exact. So if it doesn't have to be like capital letter exact, but it has to be the exact phrase. Like if I do serve, it's not going to show up there. So, there it is. So you can see there's one that says serving up here, but that's a different process. So I'm going to drop that there. And sometimes this is just a little quirk with CCB. Sometimes it doesn't show all of the options. So I just verify, yep, I did do this correctly. So even though it's not showing there, it is set up correctly. And then I hit done and then I'm finished. So now when someone fills out this form, it automates to our process queues. So it would automate into one of these 3 spots. So that's the process that I go through when, like, with events or anything. I write out the process first, then oops, I write out the process, and then I get everything written out either on a whiteboard or on paper. I build the process in CCB, add all the instructions, add the queue managers, and then if there are any forms, then I build those forms and start automating things to it. And then sometimes, just depending on the event or if I haven't done it before, I would just put someone through it. So just add either myself to the form and just make sure everything goes where they need to. I don't do that anymore, just because I've done several of these, but it's good to do initially just to make sure it works. But we're going to do a training on how we utilize CCB for VBS. And the thing, our VBS is 900 kids. So there's really no way to test it um, until you have put 900 profiles through it. So, and I'll talk about that later though. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to put your questions in the chat. Be happy to do that, answer those. Right now, I'm going to talk about what are the top 3 processes that you should have in your church. And specific process queues, processes. That's what we're talking about here. You'll have other processes, but so top 3 processes, process queues to have for your church. Volunteer approval that feeds into a volunteer care process where you are following up with people every couple months with a note or something like that. A membership process or a growth track process. If your church does not have membership, that is a great use of process queues, as well as a connection process, which I just showed you. So these 3 are really, like, this is where I would start. Like, if you haven't used processes yet, or process queues, I would really recommend having these 3. And what they look like for us, our volunteer approval process, it goes left to right. The application goes in that first one, and then background checks, we use Checker, and iChat as well, depending on where they live. And then ministry response. So from the background check, they can then go into the call references, which that is the ministries that are doing that. And so our security person will assign to the specific ministries to follow up and call their references. And then once the approval is completed, they go into whatever queue, whatever ministry they indicated they were interested in serving in. So it's a longer list there, but that just gives you an idea of what that looks like. Our membership process is pretty short. There's the interested in membership from the connection card. If they check that box, they go into this queue. Then once they've completed, our membership class is called Start Here. Then they schedule an elder conversation. And then from that, in the elder conversation, they may say that they're interested in a certain ministry. So then the elder would add them to those. And then we do have like a 30-day follow-up with the elders, and I think like a 60-day follow-up as well. Great question, Melissa. Let me put that up there. Always wondered, on the queue page, it says assigned on or off. And what does that? Oh, what page are you talking about, Melissa? I'm going to bring this up. Oh, right here. So, yes, up here where it says manager email and assigned off, and so this has to do with the email notification. So when it says assigned off and unassigned off, that means that there's going to be no email notifications to the queue managers. But if the assigned was on, you would get, or queue managers would get, a notification when they were assigned a queue. And then if unassigned was on, it would be if queue managers would get a notification if no one was assigned to a specific queue. Great question. Great attention to detail. That's very impressive. All right. And then the connection process we just went through. So this first part on the left is the actual process, and then the one on the right is a duplication of our welcome card and the options that people can select. So you can see here, different ministries have different on the right side. You can see like joining a group. Some are in process, and so that means something different to whoever is using it. The growing in my faith is just a straightforward mail merge. All right. Other processes to consider. Event registration. This is a great way to use it for like summer camp, for vacation Bible school, any of those big events where you have maybe a medical waiver you have to get. Maybe they just put a deposit down, so you need to send out a mail merge to remind them that now you need to pay your full fee for the camp, whatever that may be. Your premarital process, whatever that looks like, if it's a class or counseling that they have to do, you can set that up. That's a great one. Hospital visitations, it's a great way to assign people, maybe your healthcare chaplains or your prayer team members. You can assign them to say like, hey, Susie's in the hospital, I'd like you to go visit her. And you can do that. And then they can easily add notes to the process. And process cues are available in the Lead app. So you can use the Lead app for process cues. So that's an easy way, especially for hospital visitations. It's an easy way to get people to do the process cues. And then you can also, for mission trips, if there's classes they have to do, trainings they have to do, confirming they've had their shots or whatever process you have for a mission trip. And there's also like the back end of it, so for premarital, for mission trips, when they get back, you could reach out like, hey, how are you adjusting back? How has things changed? That type of thing. The same thing when someone passes away. It's easier when right in the moment when someone passes away to be attentive and to care, but setting, I want to check in with them 6 months from now, specifically about how they're doing. I can create a process queue for that and set it for 6 months after they're added to that queue. And then I'll get a notification, hey, you wanted to check in with Susie about her husband passing away 6 months after it happened. So here's your reminder. So that's what we mean by process cues, are great ways to get your intentions and remind you of your intentions in ministry, because there's a lot going on in ministry, right? So that is the examples that you can do. So action steps, really encourage you to make a list of the processes in your church. Pick one to create a process. If you currently have process cues that you're not using, it can feel kind of stressful, like, oh, I have all these people sitting here. I would just duplicate it, start fresh, and then go from there. Obviously some of things you can't do that with, but it's kind of depressing when you see like overdue, or this person's been in this queue for 140 days, and so start fresh, give yourself all the advantage to be successful with it. And after you've made that list and picked that, create that process. And if you have questions or you'd like me to look at the process, feel free to email me, katie@kriegelcoaching.com. I'd be happy to help and give you some recommendations on that. So if you have questions, also email me just in general about process cues. I'd be happy to answer them. And that's going to be it. This went quick. I hope this was helpful. And as always, put your questions in the group or email me, and I'd be happy to help. I'll be coming out with a new schedule in the next couple days of training webinars that we'll be covering. But it's looking like VBS, how to clean up your database, and check-in. I'm going to try to do check-in because I know you guys have a lot of questions on that. So those are going to be the 3 coming up. And yeah, just appreciate you guys spending time in your busy schedules to get better at process cues and get better at CCB, because when we get better at this stuff and we can get this stuff running, it just increases our ability to engage and connect with our people and spend time on people instead of on the data of the people. So hope you guys have a great week, and I will talk to you later. We'll see ya.